Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Elizabeth, your host of Art of the Craft of the Art, and the Executive Director of International School of the Voice. Today is really exciting for me because this is actually our first interview that we've done on the show, and we have an extraordinary person with us today, Kamal Khan. I hope you don't get too embarrassed because I'm about to read his incredibly impressive resume or parts of it. And it's so big that I'm going to make sure that it's on the YouTube page so you can see everything, and his webpage links of all of that will be there. Indian American conductor and pianist Kamal Khan combines an active performing career with a passionate commitment to the globalization of operatic training. Just that statement right there. A passionate commitment to the globalization of operatic training. He's performed with many opera companies around the world. As a recitalist and accompanist, Kamal has appeared in venues such as Alice Tully Hall, Carnegie Hall, Weill Hall, New York, the Kennedy Center, Washington, D.C., Gran Teatro Liceo, Palau de la Música Catalana in Barcelona, Palais Garnier in Paris, Suntory Hall and Casals Hall in Tokyo, the Palau de Congresos in Andorra, and the Baxter Concert Hall, Monte Cassino in South Africa, with singers such as Marcelo Alvarez, Nadine Sierra, where are we? Nadine Benjamin, Harlan Blackwell, Nico Castel, Justino Diaz, Placido Domingo, Michael Fabiano, Dimitri Borosowski, may he rest in peace, Larissa Martinez, Angela Mead, Matthew Polenzani, Juan Pons, Heran Pry, Sir Bryn Terfel. I mean, the names, holy mackerel. Veronica Villarroel, Pretty Yende, and violinist Joshua Bell. Professor Khan is a visiting extraordinary professor at Northwest University in South Africa. He is a founding member of Opera for Peace, artistic director of Classical Vocal Arts International, and director of the Taller para Cantantes in Santo Domingo, in the Dominican Republic. He's an affiliate faculty at the Royal Opera Covent Garden of the Parker Young Artist Program, the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, the Metropolitan Opera Lindemann Young Artists Program, the Voices of South Africa Festival and Competition. He was the director of the Opera School at the University of Cape Town and resident conductor and chorus master of Palm Beach Opera, where he founded the Resident Artist Program. I didn't know that. That's really great. He was also resident conductor of the Opera Festival in Tenerife, head of faculty of the International School of Vocal Study of the, am I butchering this, Balearic Islands? And artistic director.
Yes, the Balearic Islands, yes.
Yeah, and artistic director of the Mediterranean Opera Studio and Festival. He's also worked at Juilliard School, Mannes College of Music, Manhattan School of Music, and New York International Vocal Arts Institute, European Center for Vocal Arts, Chautauqua School of Music, Opera Theater of St. Louis, Ravinia Festival, Glimmerglass. My goodness, he's given master classes at the Opera Högskolan, the University of Arts in Stockholm, the Royal Irish Academy of Music in Dublin, the University of Michigan, and Georgia State University in Atlanta. I'm sure there's much more than that that's not even here. A graduate of the Manhattan School of Music, Maestro Khan was the youngest assistant conductor at the Metropolitan Opera, and during his tenure position, he collaborated with such conductors such as James Levine, Nello Santi, whom when I was a young artist at Zurich, got the pleasure of working with, may he rest in peace, James Conlon, Julius Rudel, Christian Tillemann, Carlo Rizzi, Marco Armigliato, and singers Teresa Stratas, Placido Domingo, Renata Scotto, Cheryl Milnes, Dame Cutie Tecanoa, Mirella Freni, Luciano Pavarotti, Marilyn Horne, Renee Fleming, Carlo Bergonzi, wow, Mariela De Villa, Tatiana Troyanos, Gena Dimitrova, Aprile Milo, Nikolai Gierov. I mean, it's unreal. A native of Washington, D.C., Maestro Khan was the recipient from the first National Foundation for the Advancement of the Arts Prize, and he has also received prizes and grants from the National Association of Music Teachers and the National Symphony Orchestra. Please welcome, if I had an applause button, this is where you tap it. Maestro. Hello. Are you alive?
Yes.
People, that's not even all of it, okay? We would be here for 2 days. I'm so excited that you're here because the conversation that I want to have is vast, right? But mostly, I want to talk specifically about your experience and your opinion on what it is to be a collaborative pianist, a maestro, a conductor, and much more. But before we go there, I'd love to hear your story. How are you? Where you are? How did you come to music? How are you so wonderful and prolific? Hi, tell us.
Hi, it's good to be here, Rachel. I would say a lot of the answers to the questions you want to talk about later, the
Yeah.
seeds of them are in how I started with music. I think I really started out wanting to play the violin. My mother sang in an amateur chorus,
Okay.
and every year it was a big amateur chorus, and every year they did a big symphonic work with a local pro-am symphony. This was Fairfax County outside of DC.
Mm-hmm.
And they would perform with the Arlington Symphony. And it's like, for some reason, the Fairfax County Choral Society sang with the Arlington Symphony, and the Arlington Choral Society sang with the Fairfax Symphony, and that should have taught me something about the nature of politics and music. The logical partnership never seemed to happen. Anyway,
Yeah.
Fairfax and Arlington sort of crossed the line. And when I was 3, she said it was the year they did The Creation. And I don't remember too much about that, but they say I listened a lot. And then when I was 4, they did a concert version of Aida.
Oh.
And I started, maybe I've got it 1 year off, maybe I was 5 by the Aida. But I would listen to my mother listening to the recording and following along with the score when she would study, like in the morning before I would go to kindergarten. And this is how I learned to read the score. Just listening to Cornelia Stignani, Gigli Ginobecchi Aida recording and looking at the Kalmus score. And I sort of learned to read music this way. When I finally had violin lessons and piano lessons later, no one really had to teach me how to read the notes because I kind of knew. It was around the same time as I learned to read words. My big sister taught me how to read words, and they would read me Angus and the Ducks every day, and then one day I started reading Angus and the Ducks to myself. And I learned how to read music at the same time, and I believe this means that any kid could. I believe it's because I had exposure at the same time. And Bernstein used to also say that music literacy should be taught with verbal literacy. And I really hope some colony on this planet will try this and will discover how much talent is really getting lost.
Well, just
to
interject for a second, I was born and raised in Texas, and Texas has a lot of pluses and minuses, as we all know, politically. But one thing they oddly spend money on is, in the public school system, is music. I as a child in the middle of nowhere, Texas, I learned Kodai, and there are a lot of really great singers that are from Texas. I'm certain it's because of that. From an early age, that's what we were doing. Anyway, please.
And I think no matter where people are on the political spectrum, making music together is a way of lessening those divisions and lessening those rifts. And this is part of why we founded Opera for Peace, and we'll probably get into that more later. But peace begins at home. And getting blue and red voters to sing together in high school choirs would be an incredibly positive thing. And I don't know if there's as much of that as there was when we were kids.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's really interesting.
I hope so, because we lose talent and we lose friendships.
Yeah. Yes, we lose the possibility to be human. So you're in Fairfax, you're in DC, and you're now playing the piano. What happens after that?
Lessons because the next year they did Missa Solemnis, and I heard that solo from the Sanctus to the Benedictus, and I said to my mother, I want to play like that.
Wow.
And so off we went, and that was when all the different lessons started, and I was very fortunate to have the chance to do them. And when I reached the age, I was also, as a boy soprano, singing like in the junior choir at the National Cathedral, but my parents didn't send me when I was accepted for the senior. because you had to go to private school in DC, and I would have had to drop out of my youth symphony. And my parents were not musicians, but they were not fools. And they understood that playing an instrument was in an orchestra was maybe more beneficial to my musical development than singing in boys choir. So I reluctantly gave up boys choir and stayed in there with the instruments. But when my voice changed, when I was in 9th grade, I put down the violin and started singing.
Wow.
And I had, when I was very young, wanted to be a conductor, but I had every intention of being a singer. As a mature person, I didn't think about conducting anymore.
Yes.
And off I went to Manhattan School of Music, never having lost a vocal competition, and I never won another one after that. I went to Manhattan School of Music, never having cracked, and I virtually never sang a performance that didn't have crack or a fear of crack in it after that. So I know the dangers of bad teaching.
Wow.
And my teacher at Manhattan School of Music that managed to confuse me well and good is long past. So this is not suggesting to anyone not to go to MSM. Things there are much better than they were when I was a student. I was talking with some other alumni of my age about that, and it's like, no, this is not for anything except historical information. That it's possible to confuse a real natural. Now when I'm teaching, I think, God, if a 17-year-old like me showed up in my path, I would know what to say to them to prevent problems.
Yeah. This is my whole life. This is what I do. Yeah. Yeah. I want to put a pin in that talking about where you were. We have to circle back to that at some point. The fact that you learned to sing. This is absolutely super vital to what I want to discuss today. But anyway.
In high school, I was practicing the piano 6 hours a day because my teacher said, you're very talented and I won't teach you unless you do. And I had not really thought to be a piano soloist, but my technique improved so much that I kind of could have, but I wanted to sing. And it wasn't until I got into vocal trouble and confusion and all this stuff, and just at school I was playing the piano to make some extra bucks, that all my friends who were voice majors started wanting me to play for them because I could read all the literature, because I knew all the literature, because I was a singer. And I did a master's in accompanying, basically to kill time while my voice matured. A new dean had just come to the school, God rest his soul, Martin Smith. And he freely confessed to me, I can say this now because everybody involved is dead. He freely confessed to me, although he had just become dean of the school, that there was nobody at the school who he thought knew how to teach male voices. And he said, come back and get your master's with us because you're really good at this. And I will take you to someone who was the teacher of James McCracken. And I really believe in her. And I know she would know what to do with you. Then that summer while riding his bicycle, Martin Smith had an aneurysm and died.
Oh, God.
So that never happened. Wow. But I was in there doing this accompanying degree, and I started to have so much success that I decided that it maybe wasn't the most important thing to do to get back to the piano. I mean, to get back to singing. I got an offer to start working at the Met as an assistant conductor. Well, first as a rehearsal pianist, and then as an assistant conductor right out of school. And I sort of forgot about going back to singing because I was getting real work.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I did return and study voice with a singer I had been coaching whose students I thought were great. And I asked her, she actually asked me, what's going on? They come back from their coachings with you sounding like they've just had a lesson with me. What do you know? I love the way your students sing. What do they know? And so I did have some voice lessons and put back together for my own personal satisfaction to know what went wrong.
Wow.
I really could not live with not being able to sing. And now when I'm conducting orchestra reads and all of that kind of thing, I can sing all the literature, and the guys in the orchestra love it in general because it's more fun than, having to guess where the voice is. But it was sort of like I got my superpower back on the condition that I didn't use it for me or for my ego.
That is incredible. It's a singer's favorite thing to have a conductor in front of you not only be, incredibly competent and very, very good at their job, but they know what you're doing. They know physically what it feels like to do what you're doing. That's who we want to see.
I've been there. I can hear what choices they're making, and there's no bad choice a singer can make that I didn't make on stage at one time or another.
Yeah.
I can recognize the symptoms. It's also very helpful when we get to a certain level in the career, there's less and less rehearsal in certain high pressure circumstances. I've done a lot of conducting for the finals of big vocal competitions, and it's always one pass through the aria, two passes through the aria, and maybe one of those days there's marking, and there's always a lot of weird astral energy around competitions, and in the middle of them, I've got to be responsible for actually making music with someone who is very scared and will do very well if they get in there and make music. And it's very funny. As a conductor for the finals of competitions, I'm often surprised by what happens in the adjudication, because the most complete performance of that particular aria sometimes has a lot to do with how the orchestra played it, has a lot to do with how much identification with the whole role that particular singer has.
Right.
And then certain arias have got more sizzle, and that's a whole separate problem. You know, the best executed De Mie Volenti Spiriti without a cabaletta can never win a competition.
Of course not.
And it's like, but yet maybe for me as a conductor, that Traviata aria was such a complete moment, and this young man would seem to be so clearly the next great Alfredo, that's like, I don't care if he didn't sing a C, give him the prize.
Yeah, it's clearly a gift. So let me jump into the questions. One thing that I would like to highlight for the viewers who will be seeing this now, the young artists who will be able to look at these archived videos, explain to us what are the various titles of collaborative pianists. There are lots of people that believe that everybody calls himself a voice coach. As a singer, I can tell you that's not the case. I know that you think that you're a vocal coach, but you don't know anything about the voice. So I'm not sure why you're really a repetiteur. But so we have voice coach. What's a repetiteur? What's a collaborative pianist? Is that all of the above? What's the difference between being those people? What is your experience in what those different titles are? Highlight that for us. And B, can they be the same person or not?
They can be, and they can also not be. A great repetiteur is someone who knows the literature so thoroughly, knows in certain cases, especially certain Strauss scores, where the traditional cuts are, what you have to change to do the traditional cuts. Oh yes, this note is a misprint in this score, but it's correct in that score. Who knows all that stuff and can make sure you don't show up to your first Componist or Octavian or Electra without, seeming like what our job as a repetiteur is to keep someone's first from feeling like it's a first.
Okay, let me just hold on. So a repetiteur is someone who is very knowledgeable, studied in the repertoire, right?
Who can repeat the repertoire for you and make it come together. That was the first of these skills in a sense. I developed that skill working at the Met. In the 10 years I was there, I got to the point where I knew where most of this kind of information was and how you form a sense of the singer's psychology and how often they need to repeat a passage for it to be right. You develop strategies. I became a better repetiteur in some ways when I started working with people who didn't read music so well, and I learned, or who maybe didn't speak the language, so I learned the importance of speaking the language in a rhythm. If certain kinds of scale passages, if you can't solfege it, you can't really sing it, but maybe you can fake it. And those kinds of details. And this has nothing to do with my having been a singer or whatever sense I do have of how the voice works. You need a certain basis with the language to be an effective repetiteur, because you need to be able to prevent people from making mistakes. You need to guide them, and you need to guide their phrasing so that it sounds as if they speak the language, if you have the bad luck that they don't. Early on at the Met, I had a lot of fun, a lot of opportunities to teach Italian roles to Italian-speaking singers when my Italian speech was not yet so evolved. And I learned what they found to be important. And that taught me, okay, focus on this when you're with the gringos. I see how this works.
That's invaluable. Being able to teach the language to non-native speakers, but especially a specific set of non-native speakers. How they approach English is there's a way that they would approach Italian. There's a way that they would approach Russian, Czech, whatever. So if you have the ability to be inside that psychology, right?
It could be hair-raising to teach people operas in English who didn't really speak English very comfortably.
Yes.
But it was also interesting. It made me realize how difficult English is. I taught at the Met for the first, I'm sure he won't mind the story if he were to happen to see this. Hello, Johann Kowalski, wherever you are. I taught him Oberon in written Midsummer Night's Dream, which was amazingly getting its Met premiere in 1996. Wow. I was there. And having to help him with the English language in that piece just really reminded me what a wretchedly difficult language English is to sing, although a beautiful one.
Yes.
But
it's
the
really,
number
really
of
challenging.
rules and things of this doesn't land right in my ear. Try this instead. Later on, real geniuses like Catherine LeBoeuf wrote that book, and now the process is much easier with foreign singers. But at this time, I think the book was still in draft form, if that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were just all flying by the seat of our pants. Caleb Buff has saved us so much pain.
It's a great book. I'm grateful for any of these scholars in music that have taken the time to do that. You know, Richard Cross in German, Emily Olin for Russian, you know, there's many more, but
yeah.
I'm grateful.
And even like the Colorni book for Italian, I still recommend it. Our habits have changed and cultural norms have changed. And we now close all the unstressed in E and O, and in her era, they opened them all. And so it's very strange that this is the book I recommend, and then I tell people, but of course, bear in mind that 30% of the phonetics will not be correct by modern standards. But it's still the best book.
But it's still the best.
The really important things. She says that the tongue position for the Italian U and E are the same, for example. And she said, she has the only coherent guideline I've really seen in English about how to judge which vowel is long and which vowel is short in a phrasal diphthong. You know, it's easy enough to guess that la cena è pronta, the A is longer than the A, but it's not always so easy to guess, you know, l'ardente amante mia, ea, which is really the long one. Even Italians don't agree. But she sets a basis for you in that book that if you memorize it and you go in making those choices, you will never be wrong or disrespected. One of the things I'm very concerned about is preventing my singers from being disrespected when they go abroad. You're seeing me, as you may have surmised, this is not my apartment in New York. I'm in South Africa right now. And I ran the opera studio for a good number of years. And I was very proud that when the kids took their first steps in Europe, nobody got protested. I didn't have angry emails. I didn't set them up to fail. I set them up to succeed the best they could. And I even said to them, would you rather have a tough hour in C9 or a tough hour in your first rehearsal in Europe? And people were asking for those times in C9, because once the young people started winning competitions abroad, they realized that they were getting something here that the European singers were almost jealous of. They got more opportunity to perform here than they get in European conservatories.
Yes.
And they got listened to night and day by people that knew what they were doing.
Yeah. No, we have an incredibly, we have a very beautiful system conservatory-wise, and as far as how much time is given to the students to perform, but also how varied the repertoire can be, especially with art song and such. They don't often have access to that, shockingly. In many European conservatories, they don't spend a lot of time in it. So I want to, hold on a second, it's asking me to. Yes. Continue.
We got as far as the repetiteurs, and then I got sidetracked, which is.
Please continue.
What is the next genre? The best way to become a good repetiteur is to be in a big opera house and play a lot of rehearsals. Collaborative pianist, I was having a discussion with a colleague not that long ago. We're wondering if this term even makes sense, because what's the other choice? Antagonistic pianist? I mean,
exactly.
What else could a pianist playing Schumann quintet or whatever or Beethoven Ghost Trio is also collaborative. To be a
Right.
good collaborative pianist is to be a good chamber musician.
Exactly.
Speaking the
So,
languages or understanding them is a tremendous help in being a collaborative pianist.
yes.
It's
Then,
like a repetiteur plus.
exactly. So, talk to us more about collaborative piano making. And I want to really spend a lot of time, if we can, on what a vocal coach is and does for that singer that they work with continually. Because I know that that is something that is a specialty of yours. You've discovered a lot of talent. They're incredibly loyal to you, these people. So I'd love for you to talk to us about that.
I think if we want to, the collaborative aspect is obviously once the repetiteur is also on stage with their client, they become a collaborative pianist. And as long as their technical ability is strong enough to play the literature, the other skills that they had relating to the language and relating to their ear for singing, which they've honed in their sessions with the singer, come
Right.
into play.
Mm-hmm.
The vocal coach relationship is complicated. You know, many professionals need a set of ears, and perhaps their original teacher has passed away. Perhaps their original teacher came to a fundamental difference of opinion about what they ought to be doing with their voice or their career, and they need someone, but they're not really in the position where they want to swallow a whole new set of orthodoxies.
There you go.
And they don't necessarily want to remake the wheel. There's some very great voice teachers that will only build you from scratch or will only do it, accept every aspect of what I teach. For me as a vocal coach, I don't have that luxury, nor do I really want it.
Yeah. Okay.
I have some pretty firm opinions. I like best when people that I'm working with are also seeing a voice teacher that I really know and that I can really know. And I think the sharing of information and the sharing of what's happening, which can only happen amongst professionals who really respect each other, but it's what's best for the students.
Yeah. Yes. So the coach, the voice coach, should be collaborating with the teacher or not.
If the person has a teacher, yes. If the person, my teacher took me but so far, and I like how I'm developing and I want to, then it's a different relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's great if the teacher is someone who I have watched teaching and I really understand how they work. It's much easier. I can cut straight to the chase. And I can go along to the occasional lesson too, even at this point, because I feel it's very helpful to the process that I know what the sounds they're saying yes to. Some teachers will send me video clips of when the student that we're working with together is in a lesson with them. And I'm like, thank you so much. I see what you're looking for, or, got it. We'll do more of the same in our session. But we're also, as a coach, I'm helping the student discover things a little bit for themselves.
Right.
This past year and a half, I've gotten very into taking yoga classes, and I find what I've learned about pedagogy is tremendous, because not everybody teaches a class the same way. Some people give nobody directions and everyone is working their own process. And there's some days where I'm that kind of coach, where I'm just letting someone work their own process. And there are some days where I can see very quickly, no, I'm going to correct this, I'm going to correct that, because I see the potential alignment that day that we could follow.
Yeah.
And you do it thinking a little bit about what the person has to do. You don't want to rebake the cake 2 days before an opening in Salzburg. And you also don't want to say yes to any sounds you don't want to hear on stage 3 days before an opening in Salzburg.
Exactly. Anyway, we're back. So we were talking about the difference between these titles. Do you think that there should be that those titles should be more defined for young singers?
I don't know how useful they are, but I think young singers form their assessment of who is which and of which they need There are some singers, for example, that I'm very much working with, and I work in great detail on their standard repertoire roles. Maybe they have voice teachers. Maybe they have voice teachers who actively encourage me to talk about the vocal matters with them because we're all from the same school. Um, and when they have a really difficult 21st century piece that I am not going to have time to put into my arms, they go to someone else for that. And maybe I check in later, or they send me the occasional recording from their session. Now, 20 years ago, I did learn all the new pieces. I was on the first time the Met started doing new pieces again in the 90s with Ghosts of Versailles and The Voyage. I was on both of them. And Stephen Eldridge and Donna Ratchick and I used to call ourselves the Mod Squad because we had all the new pieces. But at this point in my life, I'm very busy conducting projects of my own, the teaching and the traveling to teach. And it's not going to be the easiest thing for me to do to learn a world premiere score that someone might be singing in Denmark or in Geneva at the level that a singer needs while they're preparing. So sometimes I do step and turn that aspect of the work with somebody I value a lot over to someone who is more of a repetiteur.
Right. So just to round that question up, a repetiteur is someone who literally repeats. This is a very noble skill. And I do think that there are a lot of pianists that shy away from it because they believe that they would like to be seen as, I don't know, maybe their egos want them to be conductors or whatever else. But we need excellent repetiteurs, and this is something that we're
and
losing.
When it's a score, I know I'm happy to do that for a person. They need to, be clear about what they do and don't want to hear about, and that's also good too. Sometimes it's enough to tell someone that something is out of tune, and if they don't really want, I think at this point, generally speaking, people have come to me, they also want my ideas on how they're going to fix it.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing this for so long, and they think that some of the people I do it for sing well. But it's also okay to have the kind of relationship where that's not the information you're giving them.
Mm-hmm. Do you like for a singer?
Drill a score is important.
Do you like, or would you welcome a singer that you're newly collaborating with telling you how they would like to be worked with? Or do you find that, is it an unspoken thing you guys just manage?
It's an unspoken thing, but sometimes people are really, really quick and are really short to the point and say, I want to do it again. I want to do it, and whatever. And I'm happy to go with that energy from somebody. And a lot of the time, if I say, you think we should pass it again, or I think we don't need to pass that again, if they contradict, I'm like, okay, your time, your voice, you do it.
You do it.
And I think it becomes very, very clear what kinds of things you're there for based upon the nature of the initial contact.
Mm-hmm. What is a voice coach? Who is a voice coach? What does a voice coach need to know?
That depends if you think there's a difference between a voice coach and a voice teacher.
Ah, so interesting. Okay, continue, please. I love this.
There is a difference between a voice coach and a voice teacher in that I think anyone who's a voice teacher who didn't stand on the stage and sing major roles.
Yes.
Is kind of doing the same thing I do, but with way less musical criteria. Because part of why I'm a good voice coach is I know what happens out in the house. I know what happens down in the pit. I know what happens in the offices behind the house. I have a sense of how their work radiates in every environment that has to do with whether their career is successful or not.
Wow. That's a lot, and they're all incredibly valuable tools, specific skill sets. So in your opinion, a voice coach is someone who knows the voice in every professional setting possible, knows the a lot about what the technique is of the voice, so is able to accurately give instruction and whatever in regard to their rehearsing with you. Yes.
And to provide intelligent, creative stimulation.
Mm.
A
What do you
voice
mean by
coach,
that?
I don't think I'd like coaching Carmen if I hadn't read Prosper Mérimée. I don't think I'd like coaching Carmen if I hadn't spent a lot of time in Spain. I don't think
Wow.
it's like I've had a lot of it if I hadn't conducted it so many
Wow.
times. One of the times I conducted it, the stage director was a retired bullfighter. I learned from Josefo, God rest his wonderful soul, in Mexico City. I mean, I've learned a lot of interesting things about these pieces from interesting people in this business. I've been doing this for nearly 40 years. Um,
So
so
a great vocal coach, in my opinion, is someone that has um, far more experience than just pianistic skill, repetitive skill. This is someone who knows the voice. This is someone who knows the repertoires. This is someone who knows the singer, what it is to be a singer in some way. Either they've sung themselves or they know deeply what it feels like to be a singer. And I would say that there are very few on the planet at this very moment, very few vocal coaches, real voice coaches.
because we're also in a little bit in the business of either helping the singer to arrive at what is wanted from them, helping the singer to get more deeply in touch with what their own gifts are, and helping them handle when the two or don't appear to match, you know,
Mhm.
how to
Yeah.
put it all together.
Talk
We're
to
sort of the
me,
putting it all together person.
the putting it all together person. Yeah. Talk to me about the difference between being a voice coach and a conductor. Many pianists that call themselves either repertoire coaches or voice coaches also consider themselves to be conductors. Either they desire to be or they already are conducting. Do those things naturally go together or not?
They could. Part of why I started conducting was I had an experience of watching one Mimi that I had coached a great deal and another one who I thought was very eminent, who had both of them had the same problem with the same particular conductor at the same large house I was working at as a coach.
Mm.
And I thought, you know, it doesn't do any good to take this person who has great instincts and make her even more specific and even more moving if a conductor is going to be, but I do that in 2 instead of 4, about a
Mm.
passage that everybody has done in 4 since the world was premiered. You know, it's
Right.
great. There's the occasional conductor, maybe more than occasional, whose brilliant, iconoclastic, different ideas also work for the voice.
Yeah.
But if someone is prepared within a certain style and tradition, and as a coach, you see that disrespected, that what the singers bring to the party, disrespected time after time after time, there's a variety of solutions you can employ. And one of them is just to get up off your ass and become a conductor.
Yes.
And these were the things that were impelling me into conducting. Plus, and I don't think it's so easy in this day and age, but back in the late 90s, there were singers who had enough clout to bring you with as their conductor, even if you had no experience. And that was what the very great Menorcan baritone Juan Pons did for me.
Mm.
I was teaching him his roles and I was doing recitals with him and we were having a wonderful time. And he just suggested me as a conductor for a concert at the Teatro Colón with the Buenos Aires Philharmonic. It was a private event with him and June Anderson. And at that point, I had conducted one zarzuela in his hometown.
Mm.
Actually, it's not a zarzuela. Marina is actually an opera. So I had conducted Marina, and that was the day that I met Marcelo Alvarez, because that was his European debut as well in
Wow.
1990. And so when Juan suggested me for this concert with him and June down in Buenos Aires, this was good because I knew June from playing a lot of rehearsals at the Met together. We had a comfortable relationship. Then the same promoter, we got some in Brazil and Sao Paulo together. Around the same time, my first outreach from here in South Africa came because after apartheid ended, they still had opera, but they suddenly had no money for opera. And a call came through, could someone come down and conduct for very little money a run of an opera? And I was at that point in my life thinking, if I don't conduct soon, it will never happen. And the idea that they paid very little meant nothing to me. I said, I've just got to come get experience. And I immediately got re-engaged for 2 titles the next season. So things started to move, but my motivation was that I was tired of seeing, I don't want to say seeing singers get abused, but seeing what they brought, their concerns and what they brought to the party getting disrespected on a musical level. This was before the business of them getting disrespected by stage directors began. If it happened, if I had the same series of experiences but with stage directors, I might well have become a stage director.
Well,
you go to where you see there is a vacuum of empathetic, sensitive, educated, knowledgeable people, and you decide to do something about it yourself, or else stop complaining. That is how the Nico Castell books got written, you realize, is that the same publisher had published something horrendous that claimed to be a phonetic transcription, and Nico was furious, and God rest his soul. When he got furious, you knew he was furious, and Carol, his wonderful wife, said, well, why don't you show them an example of how it ought to be? And he showed them, and they liked it so much they hired him to write all those books. There's something to be said for righteous anger, as long as it's followed by righteous action.
Well, like in business school, one of the very first things that you should be taught, but is often taught, is, necessity, right, is the mother of invention. Where there is a lack of something, there's a business model that needs to be created to fit that. And speaking about conducting, I have a model. We've not implemented it yet. We've not had the ability to do so yet. But at ISV, I have a desire to create a parallel curriculum for young conductors, coaches, and composers, where they would be singing and learning nearly the same voice technique curriculum that the singers would be. And at a certain point, they split, and it gets more specific for them. If you could build a coaching program, a conducting program, what would be some of the most important components for that special candidate, right? What would they need to study? What kind of a curriculum would you imagine? What are those prerequisites, those imperatives?
How young are we getting them, and what have they already done are crucial questions.
Yeah, I think it would be, there would probably need to be a 2-step process. Those that are just learning music, right? Someone who would be considered an undergraduate level, let's say. But let's say it's a graduate level person who has already attended, a music conservatory and learned the basics.
And he has good keyboard skills, or she has good keyboard skills. Great. I would also hope that they would have to study singing, unquestionably.
Yeah.
European languages, extremely important.
Speaking them, not just diction, but actually
speaking them, being able to sit at a table and tell stories in them and laugh, because this is how you network and this is how you see how people think. And being able to translate a score by meaning instead of by coming in and out of the book,
Yes.
My wonderful colleague here in Cape Town, who was my predecessor at the university, my great friend Angelo Gobbato, always used to say, when the singers said they didn't know what the word meant, and they say, it's on the paper, prof. And he would say, but the paper isn't singing the aria, love, you are. And, so it's a question of the words have to become a part of us. Yeah. And for a conductor, that's crucial to gain respect and to have legitimacy. If they haven't already conducted an orchestra, that piece needs to be attended to. You would want to find out where their particular weaknesses were and have an authoritative strategic plan to strengthen them. If I had known at 15 that I was going to want to conduct, back when I wanted to sing, if some good fairy had said, you're actually more appropriate in the other regime, I would have learned to play a brass instrument. Because understanding the dynamics of what goes on in that part of the pit has not always been my strength. I knew what goes on in the string part because I'd sat there. I knew a lot of things, but I didn't know that part. I'm good with transpositions. but I would have worked even more in transpositions as a teenager if I mean, like transpositions for wind and brass parts for playing out of score. I don't mean transposing things with singers in concerts, which I am very good at, to the extent that I wish that people didn't know I could, because it gets asked a little bit too often. But it's, those are different skills. The ability to be thinking in the keys of the brass, which symphonic musicians tend to have growing out of their early experience. Sometimes for piano, if you're asking what pianists, collaborative pianists who start to conduct, where they feel their weaknesses, that's always one of them. And so you'd want to create a program where that was stronger, so that the person who had been a vocal coach and who has a pretty good understanding of where you do and don't make a liaison, and, understands a little bit about how a singer breathes and all of that sort of thing, gets caught up on the orchestral experience they lack. How to create a course for a guy with good symphonic skills who lacks the operatic stuff, that would be a much easier thing for me to figure out, because that's the set of strengths that I came in with from having tried to be a singer.
We at ISV, I have one of the classes that everyone takes when we do have the coaches, composers, and would-be conductors. It's a score learning class. Each person, regardless of what their instrument is, gets assigned a score. The singer as well, and we would go throughout the season taking turns conducting ourselves, whether we were a singer, whether we were a conductor, whatever. We are basically exposing the entire process of how the score is learned in front of each other. It's this big collaborative, round table kind of approach, so to speak, so that we're all aware of how the process happens and how it's different for each person. I think that is really, really so rich, so life-giving, and we don't have that anywhere.
Have you ever tried to give a singer like a piece of paper that's a second oboe part where all the pitches are more or less within their range, and say, okay, here's the recording, sing along with the second oboe?
Yeah.
Can be mind-blowing for them to conceive of space in the time and space in the coordinates that an orchestral player does.
But where can we go if we start this kind of learning? Oh, the places, right? I mean, what I crave now, I've always craved it, but what I really crave now as an older artist is to jam, to really rock with the conductor and with the musicians. And I want to be in the thick of all of it. And I want us to have like intimate knowledge of each other's work, so that what height can we get to? This is why I love singing art songs so much, not because of the form itself, but more that it's just a duo. And so it's a lot easier to jam with two people than it is to jam with 88. But this is something that I would love to see us do in the industry, is collaborate intimately, instead of it being singers here, musicians here, conductor there, this chamber quality, this intimate knowledge of what the other's doing.
As there is less rehearsal time, it's gotten worse. George Sell, great artist in the foreword to Max Rudolph, great artist as well, in the foreword to Max Rudolph's book, The Grammar of Conducting, which, was an old book and a great one, Sell commented that after World War II and with the invention of the long playing record, everyone, no matter where they were, expected the same quality of performance that they were hearing on their LP record in whatever city they were in, without any commensurate increase in rehearsal time. To me, that is so brilliant. And we still sort of look at it, and rehearsal time can get spent in very strange ways. It's not, don't say that there's not rehearsal time when someone has to sit for 3 months in a German theater, perhaps waiting for a premiere.
Right.
But it's remarkable how the amount of time spent making music with the orchestra is still always telescoped into coordinates that increase the anxiety of the people involved. And this idea of when you're in a school, creating a more informal, jammy environment so people are more aware of each other's difficulties. They bring that with them and they bring that comfort into the professional arena. And it changes the experience for the singer, at least. It makes the first orchestra days less of a exciting burst of terror and nerves and all of these things. And it makes it something more familiar.
We want to take music to the next level. I mean, the whole point is to make art, right? But if we can't we don't have a technique, we don't have a discipline, we don't have knowledge of each other's work, how are we getting to the art part? Often we don't get to, is what you're saying. There's not time to get to it. So,
or you get to it like in spite of yourself. And at the dress rehearsal, things start to feel real. But
that's only if your leader, your conductor, allows and curates a space for that to exist. Right?
Yeah.
So it's up to that person to create that space, because the singer could perhaps inspire it, the orchestra could perhaps inspire it, the director could perhaps inspire it, but ultimately it's determined by who's at the helm, right? It's in any organization, it's determined by our leadership. That's why I'm so passionate about having this conversation and you being my very first interview, because conducting is an art form that I believe is not understood by the majority of musicians underneath them. They don't know what conducting is. And I think that's why I'm saying, in terms of coaches, a lot of coaches believe because they can play, they're now conductors. And they're just,
can really explain why Carlos Kleiber's performances were the way they were.
Yeah.
And I got to see a lot of them. And there was mystery and magic. Wow. And there was also a great deal of knowledge of what the musicians needed to see and what they didn't. He wasn't above leaving little yellow post-its, little Kleibergrams, as we called them, in people's scores. And yet he suffered unbelievable nervous strain around performing. Was a famous counselor.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Oh my heaven. Yeah, no. It was always a question. I mean, my contacts with him were at the Met in the 90s, and my conducting teacher was Richard Wojtach, and Richard was his assistant on a lot of these all the projects he did at the Met in the 90s. And everyone always had this terrible fear that something might set Kleiber off and he might cancel. Richard brought his, in a doggy bag, in a little carrier bag, Richard brought his dachshund to a rehearsal one day of, I don't know, maybe it was Othello, and everybody was terrified. What if Kleiber finds out there's a dog in the rehearsal room? Well, when Kleiber found out there was a dog, he took a 5-minute break so he could play with the dog. Because that's who Carlos Kleiber was.
Yeah.
But there was such a mythos about it that people were terrified that he might.
Anything could set it off and that would be over.
People were, it's. And this is not a story about him having been capricious. This is a story about when you have someone who wants to collaborate and create music with this kind of freedom, spontaneity, flexibility, and polish, the nervous strain they're under and the nervous strain they place themselves under is tremendous.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And we don't have an environment where the conductor has to know what's supposed to happen and be there to help facilitate its happening. That's really easy to confuse with the conductor has to know it all.
Yeah.
The conductor does not have to know it all. The conductor cannot know it all. A performance that doesn't give me any surprises. I've had a few and they're kind of okay, and okay is okay, but they're not great art. And if you're willing to have good surprises, you got to batten down the hatches for another kind of surprises too.
Let me ask you, I'm going to change tacks for a sec. I At ISV, I don't allow the singers to coach until they've made it past level one. We have 3 levels in the school, and they each have a sub level, so there are 6 total. But um, I don't allow them to coach until they begin level 2, which means they have a reasonable mastery of the inhale, which is very specific, and a reasonable mastery of how to begin onset of phonation with managed air pressure. Because when they're with a coach, the coach is there to rehearse material. They're not necessarily ready to sing material because they don't sing it. They don't have enough discipline in the technique yet. 2, it's very difficult for them to do any expressive singing through the instrument when they don't control the air well. But often at conservatories, or I can't think of a case where they don't, they give them coachings right away. What is your
because
thought on
otherwise
this?
they think the students won't have any music to sing for their teacher because they can't possibly learn the music on their own.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is they give them coachings to make up for musical deficiencies, and in so doing, they set the singer up to be getting all kinds of information coming in at the same time as the musical information, which is there on the page, which they could have figured out by themselves, given a proper musical training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's like deepening the weaknesses in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is, of course, the system of juries, and you have to, at these schools, you have to have whatever it is, 4 pieces to sing at the end of those 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that might be good. That might be great for some people. But other people are maybe needing to learn what you're describing as level 1 for a whole year.
Mm-hmm.
Not every instrument is equally malleable.
That's right.
And the more rare type of voices are, I would go so far as to say, is they seem rarer than they are because our setup, the way we train people in conservatories, obviously works most easily with more lyric weight voices who pull themselves together quicker.
That I'm going to shelf that, but that is a huge point that we do have dramatic voices. We do have rare voices. We just don't have a consistent way of teaching that allows that voice, that space to grow in its time.
They seem rarer than they are because we bury them at the beginnings of their careers a lot.
They're awkward and they're strange, and they're not as flexible vocally at first, right? Because it's a big instrument or whatever it may be. And so they just get thrown to the...
People treat the lack of ability to sing softly, for example, as a lack of intellectual ability or a lack of human refinement, and it's crap. Singing softly.
Of course.
Yeah. No,
It's a skill.
I mean, I don't know enough about like gymnastics or about skating to know. I'm sure there are certain kinds of moves that require one sort of physical discipline and others that require another sort of physical discipline. But the demeaning of people when they don't develop certain skills at the same schedule as others, this is a peculiarly operatic thing.
It's got to stop. Well, it doesn't happen in my institution. And this is the reason I woke up that day and I said, how am I going to do this? Oh, I'm just going to start my own. Because we need a place to nurture talent, and it needs to have the rigidity needs to be removed so that they can blossom at their own time. Not everybody is a walnut tree. Not everyone's a peach tree, whatever it may be, right? You're looking at a seed and you don't know what it's going to be, but you need to water it and love it the same. Yeah.
What's a little discouraging is that when people have these voices that need more time, that often they're not therefore seen as career track people. And there's so much to be studied around the art of singing.
Yes.
If you don't have a deep understanding of European cultural history, most of the repertoire will not make very much sense to you.
That's right.
If you don't know what people went to the opera for in 1835, as opposed to why they went in 1895, because it was already quite different, as opposed to why they went in 1925, as opposed to why they went in 1995.
Right.
If you don't understand what the different conceptions of the audiences were culturally, were we doing things in original languages, were we doing things in translations? If you understand the social mores behind the original literary materials that made these pieces happen, there's enough of a study in there that they could be doing an undergraduate degree in that and coming into your room 3 times a week and learning how to manage that voice. And if after 2 years, all they've got is 5 or 6 really well-prepared arie antiche, and they're ready to go into music in the 3rd year, if they knew all this other stuff, they would be geniuses in the business.
That's right. And the entire industry would be now at a new level. And that's so important, because if we don't encourage that, then we are going to die, basically. Because why would anyone continue to spend money to go see something that's not very interesting or enlightening, right?
What happens to plants that don't have roots?
Exactly. They die. There you go. Wow. This is fascinating. We could continue and continue for days, but I'm going to just wrap it for now. We'll shelf this, because this is eventually we're going to be doing roundtables where there will be many of us in a space, and I'm going to invite you in for that, because actually I love this particular part of the conversation the most. But let me ask
really
you,
the part that's the stuff about coaching and repetiteuring and all of that. I know it went in a rather different direction, but it's
but I think it's clear. It's obvious that, a repetiteur is someone that repeats, and the voice coach is someone that really knows the voice and is able to give a complete performance preparation to that person. But let me ask you some questions. Right now, what are you working on or reading or listening to, or doing a particular hobby or activity that is inspiring you the most right now?
Well, I'm in the middle of rehearsing Lucia here for a new production. It's the piece that I did here first in 1997. So it's a wonderful homecoming kind of thing, all South African cast. The big 2 enterprises have dominated my life since when the pandemic hit. When the pandemic hit, and I thought, well, I might never conduct again, who knows? Because it didn't seem like there were orchestras, it didn't seem like there was anything. I took a look at the way I was playing the piano and decided that needed some revising. And I looked around for different ideas about technique. And I went and started working online, because there was no in-person then, with Bob Durso, strict Taubman technique. And if you don't know about the Taubman technique, you can look at the Edna Golansky Institute webpage and find out about it. It's the only technique towards the piano that I've ever seen that addresses the physicality of playing with the same clarity that good voice teaching addresses singing.
Wow.
So I completely redid my technique with Taubman technique, and that's a big part of my life. Still to this day, I have lessons with Bob when I can. When I have to play recitals, I always get the hard pieces to him with questions. And the other enterprise that sort of grew out of this, when I got back from doing the recitals in Buenos Aires and in Uruguay with Nadine about 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, I got back to New York, looked in the mirror, thought, I really weigh more than I used to. And at that point, I weighed 181 pounds. And for a guy who's 5'7", 5'8", with the American healthcare system, which does not make it nice if you get sick, I had a scary moment of what happens if you start to have the health problems that relate to being overweight. You cannot afford this in any sense. This is not good. Right. So I got very involved. I dropped about 30 pounds and a lot of vinyasa yoga. And I returned to gyrotonics, which I had studied a little before as a young man just for fun. And I became utterly fascinated by the changes in my body, not from losing the weight, but from the spinal elevation and all the various concepts taught in gyrotonics. Wow. So I've already taken level 1 pre-training, and I'm going to take the level 1 foundations course, which is work towards being accredited as an instructor of that.
Oh, how interesting.
Because there's a whole area of congruence with singers and singers' body and the use of the breath, which has yet to be explored. Gyrotonics has got many specific applications for dancers. They've got for golfers. They've, I think, even got for boxers, for
Wow.
martial artists. But I have a couple singing colleagues. Dawn Kotowski-Shikoff, Neil's wife, is fully trained as a gyrotonics instructor. And Tom Allen out at USC is fully trained. So some of us are starting to look at the synthesis here and where it goes in different ways. And, you know, my eventual goal would be to have, you only get the machines once you're accredited as a trainer, would be to have a machine and a piano in the same room and people can do the actual work while they're singing. And we see where that goes.
I would love that. I do a lot of Pilates-like work and core exercises as my singers are learning to sing. There's rubber bands and all kinds of crazy gadgets in my studio, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Things that really force you to hold the ribs in place. Yeah, by using core muscles. And anyway, fascinating.
I love thought there should be a course called Performers Core, first year undergrad, and the actors and the dancers and the musicians, singers are musicians, all take that class. And when I was here at UCT, we tried some meetings, but ultimately it was too hard to get freedom from people's different fiefdoms. That the actors and the dancers would have had a singing class together, the dancers and the singers would have had an acting class together, the actors and the singers might have had a dance class together, because it's unfair to put people in with the people that have been doing it their whole lives. But there's these other groups that have always had less exposure, and to sort of work on the synchronicities there and teach a body course relating a long-term goal.
Well, I have loved having you today. Thank you so much for giving us your time. And I can't say thank you enough. It's been incredibly fascinating. And I know now for sure we have to meet again and we have to hone in on one or two of these things and talk even further. But thank you so much, Maestro, for being with us today.
This amazing work that you're doing with ISV, and I really want to know more about it and be aware of all the phases of its development.
Thank you so much. We'll definitely be in touch. I look forward to seeing you in person.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.